We all know the feeling. The restless hours spent waiting for a message that never comes. The quickening heartbeat when you finally see their name light up on your screen. The way the world seems to collapse into silence when someone you thought was yours walks away. Or, on the other side of the story, the intoxicating moments when you hold someone's hand in the rain and believe, if only for an instant, that nothing else in existence could ever matter more than this fragile connection. We write novels about it. We sing songs drenched in it. We construct entire lives around the hope that it will save us, complete us, make us whole. We call it love. And we treat it as though it is sacred, our highest purpose, our ultimate salvation, the thing that redeems the chaos of being alive. But what if all of it, every kiss, every heartbreak, every desperate pursuit, is not what it seems? What if love is not the eternal flame we imagine it to be, but rather a trick of nature? A carefully staged illusion designed not for our happiness, but for its own ruthless agenda. This was the chilling argument of the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. While poets idealized love as the music of the soul and storytellers painted it as the key to human fulfillment, Schopenhauer dismantled the illusion with surgical precision. To him, love was not a divine gift nor a path to transcendence. It was biology wearing a mask, a mechanism created by what he called the will to life, an unconscious, blind force that drives all living things to reproduce, survive, and continue the cycle of existence. In this view, your heart's deepest longing is not really yours. The poetry of your desire, the sleepless nights, the tears shed on a pillow, they are not serving you. They are serving life itself, pushing you toward choices you believe are your own, but which in truth are dictated by something far older, far colder, and far less romantic than your imagination dares to admit. And so the question lingers: if love is nothing more than nature's manipulation, then why do we worship it as though it were the meaning of life itself? To understand why Schopenhauer believed love is not a blessing but a trap, we must first enter the dark heart of his philosophy, the concept he called the will to life. For Schopenhauer, life is not guided by reason, morality, or divine design. Beneath every human thought, every decision, every ambition, lies something deeper, more ancient, and far less rational. An unconscious force that compels all living things to survive, to reproduce, and to endlessly continue the cycle of existence. He called this blind, insatiable energy the will to life. It is not a will in the sense of conscious choice. It does not deliberate, it does not ask, it simply demands. The will to life is the primal hunger of existence itself. It pushes the lion to hunt, the plant to stretch toward the sun, and the human being to eat, sleep, and most powerfully, to reproduce. It is indifferent to individual happiness, blind to suffering, and ruthless in its persistence. For Schopenhauer, we are not masters of our lives, but vessels through which this will achieves its only aim, continuation. Think of desire. We like to believe it begins in the mind, shaped by preference, taste, or even destiny. Yet Schopenhauer strips away the poetry and reveals something brutal. What we call love, what we feel as overwhelming longing, is not a spiritual bond but the will's manipulation. When a man finds himself captivated by a woman's face, or when a woman feels drawn to a man's presence, Schopenhauer would say that it is not the individual who chooses, but the species. Hidden calculations of fertility, health, and genetic strength are at work. Decisions made not in consciousness, but in the machinery of life itself. We imagine we fall in love because we are enchanted by beauty, kindness, or charm. But Schopenhauer suggests that beauty is nothing more than an evolutionary signal, a signpost of reproductive fitness. What you call attraction is simply nature whispering. This partner will create healthy offspring. Your passion is not your own. It is borrowed desire, orchestrated for a purpose beyond you. In this view, the romantic poems and love songs that humanity clings to are revealed as a kind of self-deception. They mask the cold truth that beneath the tenderness lies a biological imperative. The lover writes sonnets to his beloved, but the true author is the will to life, dictating every line to ensure that the cycle of birth and death continues. And when we suffer for love, when we ache with longing, when we are tormented by jealousy, when heartbreak shatters us, it is still the will pulling the strings. The pain is not incidental. It is part of the design. The will does not care if you suffer. In fact, your suffering is proof that it has you firmly in its grasp. This is where Schopenhauer parts ways with centuries of tradition. Where religion saw love as divine, where poets exalted it as sacred, and where modern culture glorifies it as the ultimate human achievement, Schopenhauer exposes it as an illusion. Not a miracle, but a trap. Not freedom, but enslavement to something older than reason itself. This perspective forces a difficult question. If the deepest feelings of our lives are not truly ours, if even the intimacy of love is simply the will using us, then what, if anything, is left of human freedom? Schopenhauer's answer is bleak, but it sets the stage for his most radical claim, that romantic love, far from being a personal choice or a path to happiness, is nothing more than the will disguising itself in poetry, tricking us into obedience. And this brings us to the next step in the journey. How love, when seen through Schopenhauer's eyes, reveals itself not as a gift, but as a trap. If the will to life is the hidden hand pulling the strings of our existence, then love is its most cunning deception. For Schopenhauer, romantic love is not the magical union of two souls, but a biological snare designed to ensnare the individual into serving the species. It promises joy, fulfillment, and eternal happiness, but beneath the veil, its true purpose is reproduction. This is why, he argued, the experience of falling in love often feels overwhelming, even irrational. A man becomes convinced that one particular woman is uniquely essential to his life, as though without her his very existence would collapse. But what is really happening? Schopenhauer would say that the will has identified in her the traits most likely to produce healthy offspring: symmetry of face, physical vitality, subtle markers of fertility. The man believes he is choosing freely, but in reality he is obeying instructions written long before his birth. The same applies in reverse. A woman may feel drawn to a man, not merely because of his charm or wit, but because he radiates qualities that signal strength, protection, and stability, indicators that her children would survive under his care. She imagines she has found her soulmate, but nature has chosen him on her behalf, disguising its decision in the language of passion. This is the trap, the illusion that we are chasing love for ourselves, when in truth we are pawns in a strategy designed for the continuation of life itself. And the cruel twist is that this strategy often cares little for our happiness. The will does not ask whether the relationship will be harmonious, whether the personalities will align, or whether love will endure. It only demands that attraction be strong enough to bring two people together long enough to fulfill its aim. Look at the modern world, and the evidence is everywhere. Dating apps give the illusion of endless choice, yet they are designed around the same primal forces Schopenhauer described. Swipe left, swipe right. It feels like personal preference, but studies show that the patterns of attraction repeat the same ancient calculations of fertility, dominance, and survival. Obsession, jealousy, and desire still dominate human behavior, just as they did in Schopenhauer's century. Consider the lengths people go to when consumed by passion. Countless songs, poems, and works of art emerge from love's intoxicating grip, yet history is equally filled with crimes of passion, betrayals, and wars sparked by desire. Entire empires have been shaken because a ruler fell into the trap, mistaking the will's command for personal destiny. This is why Schopenhauer was unflinching in his critique. He did not deny the power of love. In fact, he emphasized it. But he insisted that the power is dangerous precisely because it is not truly ours. It hijacks our freedom, enslaving us to illusions that feel more real than reason itself. Romantic love, then, is not the path to salvation but a mechanism of control. It lures us with promises of ecstasy only to deliver chains. We imagine we are seeking happiness, yet what we are truly serving is an indifferent force that sees us not as individuals, but as instruments. And so, while the world continues to glorify love as life's highest purpose, Schopenhauer urges us to see it differently, not as the light of our existence, but as the snare that binds us to nature's cold agenda. If love were merely a trick of nature, it might still be tolerable, an illusion we could indulge in without consequence. But for Schopenhauer, the deception was not harmless. It was cruel. For he believed that no human suffering runs deeper than the suffering caused by love. At first, it appears as ecstasy. The beginning of love intoxicates the mind, flooding it with euphoria so overwhelming that it blurs the edges of reality. Psychologists today trace this to a surge of dopamine, the same chemical that fuels addiction. In those moments, the beloved becomes the center of existence. Everything else, career, friendships, ambitions, shrinks into the background. Love narrows the world until only one figure remains illuminated, like a single candle burning in the dark. But that very intensity plants the seeds of torment. With obsession comes insecurity, with passion comes fear. The thought of losing the beloved gnaws at the mind like an unrelenting parasite. Jealousy rises, not always because of betrayal, but because the will demands possession, absolute and unyielding. Schopenhauer recognized this torment as unavoidable. The same force that pulls two people together ensures that their bond is fraught with suffering, because desire by its very nature cannot be satisfied. It only shifts, evolves, or decays. Unrequited love is perhaps the clearest example. To love someone who does not return your feelings is to live in perpetual hunger, where each hope is crushed by silence, each gesture ignored, each longing left unanswered. This silent agony has filled the pages of literature for centuries, from the tragedies of ancient Greece to the poetry of the Romantics. Yet Schopenhauer's explanation is brutally simple: the will to life does not care for harmony. It will drive one person into obsession even if the object of that desire remains forever out of reach. Even when love is mutual, torment is never far away. Relationships that begin in passion often unravel into conflict. Infidelity, betrayal, or simply the slow fading of desire leaves behind bitterness and despair. Schopenhauer observed that after love has achieved its biological purpose, its intensity fades, leaving two individuals disillusioned, chained together by promises made in the heat of passion but unsustainable in the cold light of reality. What once felt like salvation now feels like a trap. Modern psychology echoes this observation. The chemicals that bond lovers together, oxytocin during intimacy, vasopressin during attachment, are powerful, but they are not eternal. They fade just as nature intends, because the purpose of love was never lifelong happiness. It was reproduction, and once that purpose has been served, the biology behind passion loses its grip. The individuals are left to confront a reality they never anticipated. Love's high has vanished, but its consequences remain. Consider the devastating toll of heartbreak. People describe it as a physical wound, a heaviness in the chest, a suffocating weight that refuses to lift. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain registers heartbreak in the same regions activated by physical pain. Love not only enslaves the mind but punishes the body when it slips away. It is, in Schopenhauer's eyes, the most efficient form of suffering ever devised by nature. And still we chase it. We chase the very force that enslaves us, mistaking our torment for meaning, our chains for destiny. That is the tragedy Schopenhauer saw in humanity. Our greatest passion is also our greatest source of misery. In his view, love is not simply an illusion, it is a tormenting illusion, one that seduces us with promise, delivers us into suffering, and leaves us clinging to memories of ecstasy that will never return. From the moment we are children, we are told a story. It appears in fairy tales where the prince rescues the princess, and their reward is always the same: they live happily ever after. As we grow older, the story changes form but not substance. It is whispered in the lyrics of pop songs, projected on cinema screens, sold in advertisements, and displayed across social media feeds. Love, we are told, is not only desirable, it is salvation itself. To find it is to arrive. To possess it is to be complete. But this story, Schopenhauer would argue, is the most destructive myth humanity has ever embraced. Because it takes the biological trick of the will to life and dresses it up as the highest human purpose. It convinces us that the fleeting ecstasy of passion will somehow extend into eternity, that the storm of desire will magically stabilize into a lifetime of bliss. And yet, reality tells a different story. The statistics of modern relationships reveal the cracks in the illusion. Divorce rates climb in many countries, with nearly half of marriages ending in separation. Even those who remain together often confess to feelings of dissatisfaction, resentment, or quiet disillusionment. The fairy tale ending dissolves into daily struggle, financial stress, conflicting ambitions, or simple emotional distance. What culture promised as eternal happiness reveals itself as fragile and transient. Schopenhauer believed this was inevitable. Once reproduction has been achieved, the will no longer needs to sustain the illusion. The fire of passion cools, and the lovers are left confronting one another not as enchanted beings, but as ordinary individuals. What had once seemed like destiny begins to feel like chance. The person who once appeared as the answer to all longings becomes instead a reminder of how easily desire deceives us. And yet, despite centuries of evidence, the myth persists. Hollywood continues to portray love as life's ultimate victory, social media influencers curate feeds of picture-perfect relationships, and the wedding industry thrives on the promise of happily ever after. Entire economies are built on sustaining the illusion that love provides eternal fulfillment. Why does this myth endure? Because it serves both culture and biology. For culture, it keeps societies stable, families formed, and consumer markets active. For biology, it ensures that individuals continue to pursue partners, reproduce, and perpetuate the species. And for the individual, it offers a comforting narrative that distracts from the harsher truths of existence. Schopenhauer's critique remains as relevant today as when he first wrote it 2 centuries ago. To him, love was not the crown of human experience, but one of its deepest delusions. The idea of eternal happiness through love is not just false, it is cruel, for it sets people up to measure their lives against an impossible standard. The myth lingers because it promises what every human longs for: permanence in a world of change, meaning in a life haunted by emptiness. But myths, no matter how beautiful, cannot alter the truth. And the truth, according to Schopenhauer, is that the bliss of love is brief, its illusions fleeting, and its promises empty. For Schopenhauer, the story of love was never meant to end in triumph. It was a cycle: desire, pursuit, possession, disappointment, repeated endlessly, generation after generation, binding humanity to suffering. Yet he did not leave us in despair. For while most are condemned to live and die under the tyranny of the will, he believed a path exists, narrow and difficult, but capable of leading us beyond the prison of illusion. That path begins with awareness. To recognize that love is not divine destiny but nature's cunning deception is to weaken its hold. Once the illusion is seen clearly, the individual is no longer a helpless pawn in the game of reproduction. Awareness does not erase desire, but it loosens the chains. It opens a door toward transcendence. Schopenhauer saw 3 avenues that could liberate us from the grasp of the will. The first was art. In art, he believed, we step outside ourselves and glimpse reality without the distortions of desire. A symphony, a painting, or even a poem suspends the relentless craving of the will, allowing us to experience beauty for its own sake. For a moment, the hunger quiets. The world is not seen through the lens of possession or survival, but as pure form, pure expression. The second was philosophy. To think deeply, to contemplate existence itself, is to rise above the compulsions of instinct. Philosophy grants distance, a vantage point from which one can see the games of life without being entirely consumed by them. For Schopenhauer, the philosopher is not superior because he possesses more, but because he sees more clearly. He recognizes that what most call meaning is often just the will's endless cycle of striving. The third, and perhaps the most radical, was asceticism. By voluntarily renouncing desire, whether through solitude, discipline, or self-denial, an individual can silence the will more profoundly than through art or philosophy alone. This was not a call to joyless suffering but to liberation. The ascetic, by rejecting the intoxication of love and the pursuit of worldly pleasures, begins to step outside the machinery of life itself. Contrast this with the fate of the majority. Billions live as if caught in a dream, chasing partners, possessions, and promises of eternal happiness, never realizing they are driven by forces indifferent to their personal well-being. They mistake compulsion for freedom, illusion for truth. But the philosopher, awakened to the trick, sees beyond. Where others find heartbreak, he finds insight. Where others despair, he discovers detachment. Schopenhauer's escape does not promise the warmth of fairy tales or the comfort of romantic ideals. It promises something more subtle and more profound, the chance to loosen the grip of suffering. To live not as a servant of desire, but as a witness to existence itself. Love, once seen as salvation, becomes simply another mask worn by the will. And with that recognition, freedom, however fragile, however fleeting, becomes possible. Schopenhauer's vision of love is not one that flatters the heart. It does not promise fairy tale endings or eternal bliss. Instead, it strips the mask from romance and shows the machinery beneath: biology, instinct, the blind striving of the will. To many, this truth feels cruel, even unbearable. But in its cruelty lies a strange kind of freedom. For once you see love for what it is, you are no longer enslaved by its illusions. Most people move through life haunted by the idea that love is the ultimate prize, the missing piece that will complete them. They are told that without it, they are lacking, incomplete, or somehow unworthy. This belief keeps billions caught in cycles of longing, heartbreak, and disappointment. Yet if love is not the salvation it is made out to be, if it is only nature's trick, then the pressure to chase it evaporates. The chains loosen. A new horizon opens. The cold truth Schopenhauer revealed is not a death sentence to joy. It is an invitation to redirect one's search for meaning. Instead of pouring energy into the desperate pursuit of romance, one might turn toward creation, toward knowledge, toward the stillness of inner peace. The artist who loses themselves in their craft, the thinker who contemplates the depths of existence, the individual who seeks authenticity rather than approval, all are freer than the lover endlessly ensnared in desire's web. Love, seen clearly, ceases to dominate. It becomes one human experience among many, no longer mistaken for destiny, no longer worshipped as salvation. The myths dissolve, but in their place arises something sturdier, the ability to live without illusion. To stand before the world as it truly is, harsh, fleeting, but undeniably real. Schopenhauer's philosophy does not tell us to reject life. It tells us to see life naked without disguise. To strip away the stories we cling to and accept the truth that freedom begins where illusion ends. And so, the final paradox emerges. To stop chasing love is not to reject life, but to finally see it for what it truly is.